participant, yes, of our technical training in Kyushu, Kita Kyushu. Yeah, I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also, I will dispatch the expert in the field of electricity to each ASEAN country, not ASEAN country, but also for all over the world. Yes, and yeah, that's the technical cooperation, contents of technical cooperation. So, and yes, now, yeah, we are supporting energy access improvement in developing country by focusing on the national grid extension and reinforcement of the generation plant. So then, yes, as for the off-grid electrification, so we will have a long experience. Plenty of experience especially for the solar system and micro and mini hydro power plant, and also sometimes we carry the geothermal plant project. Yes. So from our point of view, so planning by formulating master plan or feasibility study. It's very much important when we consider the next 10-year development. And also, we think, we look the importance of the operation and maintenance of the equipment, especially for the off-grid. Yes. So we started the solar power project from 1980s. Yes, as you may know, so in 1980s, due to the problem of the devices and batteries, we faced so many difficulties. Now, so devices and batteries improved a lot, but we think we still have a problem on operation and maintenance. So we are happy if governmental official, especially for Ministry of Energy, would go to the site, off-grid site, and found what's happened on the ground, and think about countermeasure for that. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayeshi-san. Yeah, we heard what HIKA, JICA, JICA does over the period. But what's interesting is, we heard from the earlier speaker about measurements, evaluations. He is also talking about feasibility studies that need to be carried out, the proper planning that needs to be done, the O&M cost, or the operations and maintenance cost, which is basically the life cycle cost of plants and putting up off-grid systems. So again, going into funding and costing of things. The next speaker that I would like to invite is from Bangladesh. He is Didar Islam, the founder of Solaric Global. And I'm very interested also from the perspective that what I've read on the backgrounds is Solaris has actually had very successful projects in Bangladesh with innovations in solar home systems and the prepaid meter-based for low-cost community solar systems. So if you could expand on that and how that, if that could be actually replicated, or what are the issues in replicating this in the ASEAN region in terms of access of electricity?
Thank you. My name is Didar Islam, and 20 years I lived in Silicon Valley. Came back to Bangladesh 2009, used my experience designing new technology and dedicating to the bottom, the last mile, which we heard this morning from the previous session, so difficult to get into the last mile. And it's not the cost of the panel, it's not the cost of the battery, it's how you deliver. Because the off-grid or the remote areas have their own challenges. One of the biggest challenge is whatever you deliver, whatever you install, how do you get the payment collected in an efficient way? Mobile financial service, as you all know, has become the day of the, practice of the day. In most of the countries, the developing countries, this thing has become so common. The question now becomes, can you use the existing technologies available? And that includes the mobile financial service, low-cost solar panels, the latest state-of-the-art battery technology, the lithium batteries, which is maintenance-free for last, 10, 20 years. So can you put this all together and make a viable solution that, in an environment where there is no regulation, can be implemented with a business plan that is sustainable? When I say sustainable, that means no subsidy required, no donor intervention required, and people can afford. A lot of people will say kilowatt hour wise is too expensive when you go into the off-grid with battery backup solution. I take exception to that. And we started in 2009, we challenged the norm. We said, at that time, no subsidy required. Everybody challenged our motivation at that time. And I said, that is where innovation comes in. Can we improve the efficiency? And what I mean by efficiency is the technological efficiency, payment collection efficiency, and providing service as an efficiency. Technology, we developed world's first 120-volt DC-based solution. And why that matters? When you start from the bottom up, make sure you give them the most efficient possible solution, which is integratable in the future. If the grid comes in, whether it is microgrid, mini-grid, or the AC grid, then as the appliances are standard, then you can easily use them no matter what solution is available. So we started out at the utility level voltage, but the efficiency of DC. So that's the technology efficiency that came in. And then on top of that, everything we did is prepaid and locked system, where you pay, you can use your system. You pay, you can use your service. And on top of that, because of the mobile solution, every 9 out of 10 home has a mobile phone, smartphone or featured phone, any of this kind. Charging the phone has become a very big issue in the off-grid areas. As long as you give them the right voltage, they can charge the phone in a right way. And that gives them the benefit of being standard. All those things we used in an advantage, which produced a very small, low-cost, and distributed solution in Bangladesh. We started in 2009, and now we are operating in 10 countries, 5 in Asia, 5 in Africa, East Africa. Every place, the nature of the problem or the demand is pretty much the same. You start out from nothing, and if you look at the cost-wise, if you're running battery, kerosene, or candle, you end up paying almost like $3 to $5 per light point. You go to lantern, the kerosene or other furnace fuel-based, it will cost you $1.5 to $2 per lamp. You go to solar home system, it will cost you $1 per lamp. You go to microgrid, mini-grid, it will end up costing you like 50 cents a lamp. Now, we talk about measurement. You can do it on a kilowatt-hour basis, or you can do it based on the experience or the service that we are providing to the end user. That might have different denominator for everybody. End of the day, it is affordable compared to all the alternative solutions that's available out there, even compared to the cost of the grid extension. If you extend the grid today in the remote areas, look at the number of percentage of population who are actually legally connected to the grid. Based on our lot of experience, it's not even more than 20%. So you're connecting $400, $500 per home kind of grid extension cost. You can get the same or even better level of service paying only $200 per home, whether it is mini-grid, microgrid, or any kind of distributed solution. So the DESCOs, distributed energy service companies, are just thing of the day. It's going to happen today or tomorrow, and the key enabling or barrier, if you call it, is the regulation or deregulation. If we get into deregulation, you will see a much faster growth and getting this last mile connected in no time. And this happened in Bangladesh. 5 million homes are now using this distributed solar home system, which is 25% of the entire off-grid population. It happened in one country because there was no regulation. And regulation was not, deregulation was done on purpose so that this can actually scale up. So based on our experience, it is doable, it's happening, and it will happen in other countries. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Didar Islam, on that. So what we can pick up, and maybe we can ask him a bit more in details, is the collection systems of prepaid seems to work in low-income communities. He talked about the cost moving from grid-connected to solar home systems to microgrids, which are very economically viable from what we hear from him. The other one he talked about was on storage. I've always had this impression when you bring storage into solar home systems, it sort of brings the cost up, but we are hearing otherwise. And the other thing is the integration of the systems, because solar home systems works on a DC system, and how it's already ready to be attached to an AC system if the grid is extended, and how it can be integrated into the grid system when it comes on. So these are interesting things that we have heard from Didar Islam. Thank you for that. Yeah. And the last speaker is from the private sector, General Electric Power of Indonesia, David Hutagalung. And David, it's very interesting from the private sector. Of course, you're based in Indonesia. Indonesia has got a big target, 35,000 megawatts in the next 4 years. They are putting something like $88 billion into investments. Is this workable? How is this going to actually address the accessibility in Indonesia? Indonesia has many islands, depending on the tide, of course. And you also have communities that are very remote. How is all this going to be addressed from the perspective of particularly a technology provider like GE in Indonesia and within the region, of course? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, Mr. Moderator. My name is David. I'm with GE, General Electric, or GA, or however you want to pronounce it in this part of the world. And I think what I can share about Indonesia's ambitious program in the last couple of years is that it is one of the biggest power built-up program, I think, anywhere in the world. It is a huge, Indonesia is embarking on a huge energy access program, actually, right? With current electrification ratio in Indonesia of about 88%, more or less, depending on how you and who counts it. The government wants to build up this 35,000 megawatts of new power to bring up the electrification ratio to about 98 point something to 99%. So it is a very big program. It's a very ambitious program that GE, I think, is very happy to support. And I think if you go to Jakarta these last year or so, if you go to PLN or if you go to ESDM, there's a long queue of people trying to meet with the different stakeholders, from the technology providers, from the governments, financiers, EPC developers from around the world, IPP developers. So I think everybody is interested. The problem with Indonesia, I guess, in the past has always been its SIEW ratio has not been that great, right? There's been ambitious programs in the past that have not succeeded as expected. But for us, for GE, we see that this time around, things are different. The environment is different. The stakeholders are now, yes, there's issues here and there, but the stakeholders are now much more focused. That's from the overall environment. From the GE point of view on how we have tried to offer our support to the government in helping them accomplish this big program is, we have a diverse technology solutions. So we have offered to the government a fast power kind of solution. You know, we have a mobile power technology that can bring power to the grid, to the remote areas very quickly. This offer, I think, has resonated with the government, and at this moment, we are implementing a mobile power program with PLN to put up these small-sized power plants in 8 locations throughout the country. Hopefully, it will be all come online within the next month or so. That's one. Two, we also understand the government's needs for efficient power generation technologies. So we are coming into the government with an offer of our highest efficiency gas turbine technology, for example, the HA technology. I think that has also resonated with the government. With the recent acquisition of, GE's acquisition of Alstom, we also have technology that can help them on the steam side, on the coal side, right? Which is, I think, is also which is also getting acceptance from the government. To help with the outer islands, we are also coming to the government and to PLN with a gas to power kind of solutions, you know, where we come in with a complete package from gas to power. This is to help address the problems of not having enough gas infrastructure in some of these outer islands. Last, we're also coming to the government on how we can help on the renewable side. We have a few waste to power programs. We have a couple of biomass programs and initiatives with the governments both at the national and also at the regional level. And we are now also talking to them about bringing our wind and solar technologies to the grid. So those are, Mr. Moderator, on the high level, what we're trying to do in Indonesia in terms of energy access.
Thank you, David, for that in terms of what's being done from the private sector and helping the government achieve those big targets in Indonesia of 35,000 megawatts in the next 4 years. We did hear about the diverse technology that's available, small-sized power plants. Again, we are hearing about efficiency, improvement in power plant technology and how that helps us also. And of course, again, the introduction of renewable energy into the grid. With that, ladies and gentlemen, is sort of where the panel has made their thoughts in terms of access of energy, especially within the ASEAN context. And we have got exactly about 12 minutes left for some questions. So if there are questions, please raise your hands, and I think yeah, there are people with mics who will come to you, and yeah, let's take a few questions. This gentleman in front here. If you could state your name and the affiliation, it'll be good.
Okay, good morning. My name is Joy Surya Dharma. I'm from the Chamber of Commerce in Indonesia. It's quite interesting panelist sharing. I'm quite familiar with the ICE program in Indonesia. I think ICE 1 and 2 by the USAID. Also, we also have actually JICA for the last 2 years on the Clean Development Mechanism program. So, but my question actually will be addressed to the moderator itself. How do you see, I mean, in Indonesia, and also in when it's a topic in ASEAN, because I know the Asian Center for Energy in the past few years have the program to connect with the country. I know some of the program in the past, like the pipeline gas to ASEAN, is not really progressing, right? I mean, I don't know how I see it now. So how do you see this kind of US, Asian kind of USAID ICE program? Is it in the blueprint of the US, I mean the Asian Center for Energy? How do you integrate with this, with the Asians? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have another question? We will address the questions here. The gentleman at the back.
Hi, Mike Mahalik, U.S. ASEAN Business Council. My question is to Dr. Islam. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the storage systems that you use in your technology, and also get a comment from you on seawater battery storage, which seems to be coming out more and more these days.
Any more questions? I thought I saw a hand on this side just now. No? Okay, let's address the two first, and if you have anything coming up, do let us know. So the first question on the various sort of programs that are written, going on in, from the donors and the international organizations, and how that aligns to what ASEAN is doing. The question was also, what is ASEAN doing and how the priorities are in terms of the interconnectivity that we talk about. I did mention in the APAC, or the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, 2016-2025, there are 6 areas that we concentrate on, and 2 of them, as what is mentioned, it's known as the APG, or the ASEAN Power Grid. The minister from Malaysia just spoke this morning in terms of the MOU that was signed between Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and of course Singapore at a later stage. But that's part of what is being done. Of course, that earlier memorandum in terms of getting ASEAN connected was signed in 1997. We have started from 0 trading to we are about 5,000 megawatts today. But most of that is basically on a bilateral agreement, and we have not gone into a multilateral agreement where areas of harmonizing grid codes and interconnectivity must be looked into. The taxation and the legal framework between these countries need to be looked into, the third-party access, and is there actually a need for sort of an organization, a regulatory organization for the trade of electricity between multiple countries. So these are things that actually what the minister, to enhance what he has said this morning, is basically this MOU, which talks about the 3 countries initially and Singapore eventually, would look into these aspects. And hopefully the ministers have agreed in in Myanmar this year, in September, met that by next year this thing has to move forward into actual trading. And with that, you will have surfaces of the challenges that we face and what ASEAN needs to do. And towards that, you have a group called HAPWA, and they've got task groups in there which are looking to address these issues. So that's moving along. The other one you asked about was, it's known as the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline, TAGP. That's is part of a group called the ESCOP, which is the Association of Petroleum Council of ASEAN. They are made up of actually the national oil companies. Pertamina is one of them, PTT and Petronas and so forth, are part of this group, which looks into how actually we could move and trade gas. Apart from just the gas pipeline, now they've actually got the virtual pipelines, which they talk about the regasification terminals. And we heard some speakers yesterday speak about it. There are already 4 already operating, 2 more in the pipeline. So in terms of that, that is also moving about. But again, we are now moving into, in that we are also talking about third-party access and how third-party access can be used so that it facilitates more LNG movements along the ASEAN country. We are also looking at the LNG flexibility, destination flexibility clause that are in most contracts, how to move this. So that's part of what has been done in the ASEAN region, and it's part of that APAC document that I spoke about. That's to address your issues. There was a second question by Ambassador Mike to Dr. Islam. So if you could address that.
On the battery side, when you're talking about off-grid, some kind of storage is always necessary. We started out with lead-acid battery, which is the cheapest price-performance solution available today, 10 US cents per watt hour. That's the standard rate. Now, when you talk about cost, it's not only the cost of the material, but when you're talking about off-grid, there are many, many issues comes into the picture. The single most issue is the size. Just to give you a perspective, a simple home system, a 100 ampere hour battery will be 100 pounds. Now think about a 100 pound item, you're sending it to 100 miles away. If something goes wrong, somebody has to provide service for over 20 years. You put all these numbers into the equation, you will see it's not just the cost of the goods itself, but the most prohibiting thing is the size and the weight. Lead acid fails miserably on this. Now, the available technology, as of today, is lithium batteries. The lithium ion that we use for mobile phone is okay for the phone, but when you're talking about the storage in a bigger way, the lithium iron phosphate is the latest technology that's coming out, and we have already started using it. Price in the rate basis may be high, but if you look at into other equations, for example, the weight and size is one, and the second one is the DOD, we call the depth of discharge. Like every day, how much percentage of the capacity you can discharge. And you take into equation the lead acid versus lithium, it's 3:1. Like you can do 100% discharge every day if it's a lithium battery. On the other hand, for lead acid battery, you can only do 30% a day. So that immediately can cut you down in terms of capacity by 3:1. So if you take into all these equations in the consideration, the lithium batteries existing is already at par with the lead acid battery. The other alternative technologies, like you mentioned, and there are also like liquid batteries, chloride batteries, the NiCad solutions. These are all different technologies that are coming up, but at the moment, lithium is an alternative to lead acid. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? We've got about 5 more minutes. Any pressing questions before you have lunch? If not, it'll be difficult for you to have lunch. If there aren't any more questions, I'm just going to go and ask just one more question to the panel. In terms of, maybe Dr. DuPont would be the right person from the international organization. You were talking about a lot of sort of international organizations, agencies coming with grants, helping us for a long period of time in terms of the $1 billion spent. But yet today we have 100 million people who do not have electricity, in the ASEAN region. Your thoughts? What's the other things that are hindering, or basically I should put it the other way, how can we enhance or expedite the process in which we want to electrify?
That's a simple question to get to before lunch. So, well, I'm going to start with the elephant in the room, which is that the amount of investment going, well, first, as I mentioned in my question earlier, projections are that most of the rural people who are not now connected will be connected not by a centralized grid, but by mini grids or some sort of off-grid system. Okay? And so that's PwC's analysis. I think that's probably going to happen. So how will that happen? And so, I mean, the elephant in the room, if you look at the off-grid market and you look at, say, the solar off-grid market, the Sustainable Energy for All did a very good study of the market. How much has been spent since 2010? Anyone have an idea? Billions of dollars? Billions and billions of dollars. Well, $511 million globally. That's scary. That's so low. But, okay, if you look at that, let's break that down. So in 2015, it was 276 million. So the rate of spending is increasing. And an interesting thing about that is that about 40% of the investment on projects in the ground is for pay-as-you-go systems. And I'm interested in Didar's take on this. 40% of the investment into systems on the ground is for pay-as-you-go. That means most people are paying cash. But if you look at the companies that are raising money, 80% of the investment money is going to pay-as-you-go companies. Pay-as-you-go companies that have mobile apps like M-Kopa that they do in Kenya, which uses the M-Pesa currency, they are able to raise twice as much money in half the time. And I'll say that again. Companies that have pay-as-you-go systems as their core of their business model can raise twice as much money in half the time. That's where I think we should be. And regulators should get out of the way, and development agencies should only do what is needed to help get a project or a business across the line to bankability.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'll just go around and give the other speakers just to wrap up. We are basically, so can I start with David first? Yeah.
I think just to follow on the last comment, I think one other thing that would be helpful if there is an effort to help the local governments in helping them structure procurement processes around some of these newer technologies. I think what we're seeing in Indonesia, stakeholders often find it quite difficult to try to synchronize their current procurement regulations with some of these newer technologies, with some of these newer business models that the technology providers and some of the other institutions have to offer. So I think from me, maybe there should be a concentrated effort to try to work with the respective governments in trying to develop procurement rules, procurement regulations that support these kind of initiatives.
Thank you, David. Ayashi-san?
Okay, so my answer against the last question is very simple. So involvement is most important. Involvement at initial stage is very much important. So when we plan the project, we involve the other donors and recipient country, government official and the local government, and the stakeholder at the local people. So when we fail to do this, so we face a difficulty at the implementation stage. That's all.
Thank you for that. And Ida?
Two things. Number one, what is the role of development partners and government for something which is already commercially viable? Look at the two examples, M-KOPA in Kenya and Solar Home System EAT-CALL program in Bangladesh. The EAT-CALL program started in 1996. World Bank stepped in 2001, 5 million homes connected. At that time, solar was not commercially viable. Today's situation, honestly, the World Bank's program has become irrelevant. Kenya has become the example. When Kenya started, the market has already become commercially viable. The only issues were the implementation hurdle. M-Pesa came in, mobile financial service came in, pay-as-you-go concept started, private sector money started coming in. So they started at the time when the market already has been into commercial mode. So if we are living in this now, where solar is already viable, already commercially viable, let the private sectors come in and add the innovations and efficiency that is required. Now, from the government side, I've been advocating in Bangladesh to the government for a long time. Look at the comparison between Bangladesh and India. Bangladesh is a very small, tiny country. 25% of the population already using renewable solar home system. 25%. Look at India on the other hand, not even a single 1 or 2%. The only biggest difference, there are many issues, the biggest difference is regulation or deregulation. In Bangladeshi government have taken a very innovative approach saying anything below 250 kilowatt, anything below 250 kilowatt, we're not interested. Do whatever you want. Market, consumer will decide what price and what solution they will take it. Enormous growth. On the other hand, in India, for example, if you go, there's a regulation if you are a small DESCO generating energy and trying to sell the energy to the consumer, you cannot. You have to take permission, license, just like a bigger utilities. So that mindset, how to handle small scale innovations is the barrier. If we can deregulate at some level, depending on which country we're in, and if you're using pay-as-you-go, like mentioned before, these two are happening already. It's just when we understand it better, it will fuel the innovation and the growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've run out of time, and there's something flashing here, say, please wrap up. Allow me to wrap up. I think we've had some good, interesting insights. We talked about technology. Solar has come out as one of those technologies that we should be looking in the ASEAN region. Grid connected versus distributed generation. Distributed generation seems to be the answer, workable. We heard about regulators getting out of the way, so if there are regulators in this audience, think about it, about the smaller scale distributed generation that needs to go. We talked about the procurement processes that the government needs to understand, the single window aspect of getting permits done, and of course from JICA we also heard about the planning process and the life cycle cost. So with that I wrap up, and before we leave I would like to thank the distinguished panel for their views and their thoughts and sharing this with us today. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you.
Dr.
Have a great
Sanjayan
lunch.
as well. Thank you. We'd like to invite the entire panel for a photo, as we do, a group photograph. And for the rest of us, as this panel has been wrapped up, as Dr. Sanjayan has mentioned, it is now time for lunch. Lunch, if you may like to know, is served just on the outside. Just exit on your left, just at the back where the foyer is. Lunch is right there. The next session will be held right here at 2 p.m. You have a nice long lunch, ladies and gentlemen. Subject of discussion at 2 p.m., energy access in focus, technology and investments. 2 p.m. right here. Bon appetit. See you soon.